Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and my sincerest thanks to all of you for being here for the next session, which is a very important session in our opinion, electronics manufacturing in India. And we have with us a strong panel of speakers, and I would be very happy to introduce them to you one by one and to request them to join me on the stage. I'll start with Mr. Vinod Sharma, Managing Director of Deki Electronics Limited. Ladies and gentlemen, I must tell you that not only is this a strong panel of speakers, but they're also very, very articulate as well as very knowledgeable. And I would say to you that you will benefit from listening to them and be careful about what is being said, because there are some nuances sometimes that one misses. And these are very important nuances, and you should be able to question and answer later on when you need to get more clarification. The second speaker that we have is Mr. Deepak Thakkar, and he's the Senior Director of Corporate Business Development at Flex in the United States of America, and they also have an entity which is based in India. Welcome, Deepak. Thank you for being here. The third speaker is Mr. Sanjeev Narayan, Managing Director of SGS Tekniks Manufacturing Private Limited, another storehouse of knowledge as far as electronics manufacturing in India is concerned. Please welcome all of them. Please show. Thank you. The last speaker is Ravi Shankar, Managing Director of Savitri Group. And I would like you to welcome him as well, please. Thank you. He will tell you about some of the challenges that he has experienced and he has overcome in the process of setting up manufacturing in this country. Having said that, if I was to take the cumulative knowledge of all their experiences, I think we would be reaching about 100 years of skill and knowledge. It's a different thing talking about experience. You could do 20 years of experience and say that you've repeated it 20 times. Or you could talk about 100 years of experience and think that, yes, every year you've learned something more. And that's a difference. So what you've got here is a group of people who will be able to share with you the knowledge that they have gained over this cumulative experience of 100 years. Let me share with you just a few brief outlines of what I consider to be extremely important as far as manufacturing in India is concerned. One is that, as you all know, the services sector has been growing rapidly. The services sector contributes to plus 60% of the Indian GDP, which is between 62 to 63%, if not more, if I was to have the latest economic statistics at hand. Agriculture, which at one point of time, at the time of, in 1947, contributed to about 70+% of the Indian GDP, today contributes to about 13–14% of GDP only. Manufacturing, which at one point of time used to, and I think that the gentleman on the dais would be able to give us some more information about that, particularly Vinod, is that manufacturing in 1947 probably contributed to about 34–35% of the GDP, and today contributes to less than 16% of the GDP. So, is it distorted? I don't know. But I do know a few facts, that when we look at manufacturing in India, it's broken up into large scale manufacturing, medium scale, and small scale. And we have what is considered to be India as tiny or micro. But the bulk of employment in this country comes from small and micro industries. And that's when I'm talking about manufacturing. I'm not talking in terms of any other sector. So in manufacturing, the bulk of employment, which is critical to India's current needs and context, comes from the small and medium manufacturers. And I would dare to say, if I was to just give you a benchmark figure, probably 60% of the labor is employed by this sector. Now let's look at it a little differently. This sector also actually does R&D. Consider that. Think about it. R&D comes from small and medium industry. And they contribute, their GDP, their expenditure is probably 5% or 4%. And I think, again, Vinod will be able to give us some more figures on that. 4 to 5% of their top line is spent on R&D on an average. So there are companies which do much more. The national average of R&D in India is less than 1% of their top line. Now, therefore, the R&D is also coming from small and hungry entrepreneurs, the small and hungry people who have a vision, who have a dream, who have the drive. And they are the ones who contribute towards the innovation, so to speak, in our country. There was another point that I was wanting to make and it just skipped my mind, but I want to end here to say that it's extremely important that we look at the electronics manufacturing sector as a means of being able to contribute more as far as this economy is concerned. And I know that we have many challenges. I understand that not only do we have challenges, but we also have obstructions. So we won't dwell too much on the obstructions, I hope. We can dwell on the challenges and then talk in terms of how to overcome these challenges so that we attain the level of electronics manufacturing that we think we should be comfortable with in our country and in our environment. So with those few words, I'm going to leave the session moderation to Vinod, Mr. Vinod Sharma, Managing Director of Deki Electronics, and I can't think of a better person who should be here to take you through this discussion. So thanks very much, all four of you, and I'm sure this will be an extremely productive session as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prem. Thank you for inviting the four of us here. And thank you for the audience. Let's make this a very interactive, interesting afternoon for all of you. It's not the best time of the day to be sitting in a conference room like this. I'm reminded of an old story where the subject on that particular day I was talking about was accountability, taking ownership and responsibility. And people had had a nice lunch. I think they had had a busy morning. And I was, by somebody as gracious as Prem, they decided to put me down on this podium. And so there was an audience which was looking a little sort of, needed a little rest, to say the least. So a little later in the, while I just finished some part of what I had to say, I figured that a gentleman right in the front row was kind of dozing off. And I decided that's okay, I can ignore this. And I carried on with my address and my presentation. A little later, this gentleman, however, decided to make himself a little more comfortable. So he perched his head onto the shoulder of the guy who was sitting next to him. And then I was finding it difficult to move away from that image, but I did for some more time, till I really had to stop because he started snoring. And everybody's attention was onto him. So I stopped my speech and I said to the gentleman who was awake and next to him and giving a nice shoulder to this neighbor of his, and I said, "Sir, could you please wake up your neighbor?" He said, "No, sir. You are the one who put him to sleep, so it's your job. Don't talk to us about accountability. Now you wake him up." So I don't want to be in a situation like that today, and I hope that I won't have to wake any one of you up. I'm quite confident that won't happen this afternoon because I think we've got a galaxy of three very, very eminent speakers. At least two of who I know very well and have a lot of respect for. But before we get to that, and I think Mr. Bahl very rightly touched upon this fairly large discussion about electronics manufacturing. So I'm going to use the first few minutes to just sort of open this up for discussion. What I see in the audience, some of you are from business, are professionals engaged in electronics. Correct me if I'm wrong in my assumption. And a few of you are students who are probably wanting to understand what electronics and what manufacturing is about. Am I correct in this assumption? I can't hear you. Yeah, good. That's good. That's a good start. Okay. So while we go through this, hopefully we will have enough time today for some interactions and questions from the floor. And before you get that privilege, I'll have the privilege to also grill my three speakers and panelists on a few questions of my own. So let's try and make it very interactive. So what is so interesting about electronics and electronics manufacturing? Let me address this from a business perspective first, because after all, it's an opportunity that gets us all here together. The world of electronics, and if my figures are right, is somewhere close to $2.4 trillion today, right? Don't have to remember these big numbers, but it's a large number, because if you divide that by the population of the world, you will get to somewhere between $300 and $320 per capita. That's the amount of electronics being consumed. Now, some of you might say that that's not such a good analogy, because electronics is not like water or beer or tea that I will calculate as per consumption. But we do know that after our basic needs are met, namely, you got enough food, you got a job, you got some shelter, one of the first things that even the poorest person, even in a country like India, is acquiring happens to be an electronic device. 30, 40 years ago, the construction worker would still go buy himself a small radio set and entertain himself while he's working on a small brick wall or a mortar or whatever. Today, that has got replaced by, of course, the cell phone, right? Which serves many purposes besides being a communication device. And it's pertinent that I mention this in a fantastic environment like the Convergence India, which I believe is in the 26th year. And on that note, I must say, I didn't know it was the 26th year, to be honest. But hats off to the organizers, especially to Prem Bell, to have thought of this 26 years ago, because I think, at least I did not understand the meaning of the word convergence, definitely not as I understand it today, that many years ago. So looking at, so if this whole world is using on an average $300 worth of electronics, how well are we doing in India? And in India, we know that we are a very large growing market. We are growing at a fantastic CAGR. But that number today is about $60 for India, the $60 per capita, which brings it to about $80 billion is our total market. Some people would say it's about $100 billion. So somewhere between this figure. Manufacturing of this I'll come to in a little while, but the demand, so you can imagine that there is no reason why the India of today and the new India that is being spoken about by our leadership, by our citizens, which might happen in 2020, 22, 24, that's all right. It can be 2 or 3 years or there. But I think this number going from $60 to $300 is a given. We will at least catch up with the global average in the next 5 to 6 to 7 years. And so to all of us who are in business, that is a fantastic number to go by. You're talking about a 5x growth in 5 years, what I famously call the 5-5-5. Now, which kind of an organization would want to stay away from an opportunity that's a 5x5 kind of opportunity? And if we do stay away, it's going to be totally at our own peril. So the demand is very large. But I think the discussion today is not so much about electronics demand. It's about what are we doing about its manufacturing, where are we, and what are the challenges, and how does it look going forward from here? So one of the key reasons that even someone as bright as Mr. Narayan Murthy, when he was the chairman of a task force set up by the then Prime Minister, Mr. Manmohan Singh, he was tasked with the idea of how can we grow electronics manufacturing in India. And when he delivered his report, the first sentence said, as far as electronic hardware is concerned, we have missed the bus. And that really got me very, very anguished, I must say. I actually sought him out and I had a word with him saying, you're absolutely right, sir, in your observation that we have missed that bus. But as a citizen of this country, I firmly believe it is not a bus that we can afford to miss. If every single cell phone, every television, every mobile device, every tower, every medical equipment, every single LED lamp, we can just say, oh, we missed that bus. We are going to import it from our neighbors. Number one, our forex situation, our trade balance, our trade deficit will not allow that. I don't know how many of you in this room are aware that electronics even today is the second largest contributor to trade deficit in this country after oil. In fact, there is a second one which is capital goods, but I don't take it as a sector because that depends on how much investment is being made into the country, into all sorts of things. So if you miss the capital goods, we are very, very close there. We are the second largest trade. So out of the market of $80 to $100 billion, almost half of that, $50 billion, is being imported. Even today, while we've done some good work in the last few years. How long can we afford to continue to import electronics, number one? Having said that, I'm sure Deepak will raise this point that electronics is a global supply chain driven business. There is no one company in the world that can say, whether that's an Apple or a Samsung or an LG or a Sony in the erstwhile thing or Panasonic, All these large players, or Flextronics and SGS, which are large players in the electronics manufacturing services area, no one company can claim to be even, I would say, a double-digit contributor to the entire value of any product. What I mean by that is a product is going to cost you $100. At best, a company must be contributing $10. And that would be a big surprise. Typically, it will be less than that. So we are obviously a very integrated supply chain driven business. So don't get me wrong when I say it's not a bad thing to be dependent on imports. Whether you like it or not, we will be dependent on imports to a very large extent for components, subsystems, especially active components, semiconductors. But while that is true, we also in a country like India have a severe issue of job creation, and I'm sure you're reading about a lot of it, and the people at the back of the room, all of you students, are looking for some jobs in these areas. So I think as a business, we also have a responsibility not only to meet with market demand, but also to meet with the social demand, the economic demand of creating jobs. Now, fortunately, this is largely a green business. If I were to try to create the same kind of jobs through other industries, manufacturing or non-manufacturing, the environmental impact of those is much larger. So while electronics on the one hand adds a lot of value, whether it's strategic value, we know in our own lives the whole Digital India program, or whether you look at the whole, direct subsidy into the. So all these programs that have been recently announced by the government are being worked upon, are delivering a higher, I would say, quality of life, not just ease of doing business, but ease of living in this country. And they will continue to do that because that's the nature of electronics. So in such a field, I don't think we can stay away from saying that we are not going to add any value or not adequate value or not manufacture it. That's a no-brainer. And strategically, it will be very, very wrong, I think, in my opinion, for us to depend on some other country completely for this. So in this context, why is it that we are not producing enough? We seem to have the talent. In fact, our engineering talent, design talent is being used by the rest of the world. We seem to understand this, so it's not that electronics is new to India. People like Mr. Narayan have been making components and selling them, and then now EMS for almost 40 years. The first televisions, black and white televisions, radios, and television sets before that were being made. So at least I'm not that old or that experienced, but there is. So we've had the experience of putting together some kind of electronics for a long, long time, designing it, fabricating it, testing it, selling it, and driving that supply chain. So we don't lack in experience or in talent. But there is one large factor which has prevented us from getting into the business, which is cost. Right? So while we are still a developing country or relatively poor country, our cost of manufacturing is not really cheap. Whether it's the cost of basic economic factors, if I may say, electricity, the cost of finance, working capital, fixed capital, the culture of finance, paying people on time, using low amounts of working capital, etc. And finally, logistics. Make no mistake, because you spend a lot of time and energy and money in this business on pure logistics. A simple Apple phone or a Samsung phone has a couple of thousand components in some cases, and these come from all over the world. So if your logistics within the country is not, and so let me just give you one sort of data point on that. So this cost of logistics, and you might say that's a very simple point that I'm taking up, but that's exactly why I want to take that point up. So some wire that we get in a container every month, 2 containers from a place called Shaoxing near China, Shanghai, 300 kilometers from there, is put onto a container and then sent to the Shanghai port. From Shanghai port, it comes to Mumbai port. And from Mumbai port, it comes to my factory in Noida. The amount of time taken from Shaoxing onto a ship in Shanghai and to JNPT port is 21 plus minus 1 day. This is over the last 10 years, I'm telling you. It has never been anything else. The cost of freight is 4 rupees a kilo of this wire, because it's in a container, it's a large consignment, it's a heavy thing. But from Mumbai port to my factory in Noida, it has taken the lowest, the minimum has been 7 days, the maximum has been 28 days. And the cost of freight on an average is 14 rupees a kilo. So it's not a small thing, the kind of multiples, and there are some businesses, and I'm sure when Deepak will talk about it, these are businesses, hats off to these guys, they are operating at a profitability of 1.5%, 2% in some cases. So if that could easily go wrong, if one factor of production or manufacturing. So this is true of all manufacturing, you might say. Why is manufacturing so hard? Why is Make in India so hard? Because in my opinion, when everybody, the demand, the drivers, the taxation, the way the government looks at business, when that is right, And then all the enablers, which means all these, infrastructural issues, ports, roads, airports, the inspector in the factories, the inspector on the road, everybody wants it to work. And finally, when you have some strong-hearted entrepreneurs like us who are willing to put their risk capital into it and stand out there for 20, 30 years and do the hard work, deal with the government on one side, deal with labor on another side, deal with fluctuating market demands on the third side, when they are able to put all this together, will good manufacturing happen? It's not an easy game, and it's not for people with weak hearts. Now, while this is true of all segments, it's also happening in automotive, it's also happening in pharma. Why is it that we are not doing so well in electronics while we are doing reasonably okay in other areas? And the one answer to that, as you probably know, is that we signed up this WTO agreement called ITA-1, which has had some very positive impact, which is that all of us get our laptops, our IT equipment, and several other electronic equipments at reasonably world-class prices, because there is a zero basics custom duty on them. But the trade-off for that has been that manufacturing, which we had seen 20, 25 years ago, has eroded into trading, into assembly, into low value-added manufacturing, and the creation of jobs has become a big challenge. So where is the midway? What are we going to do about this? And I think I will reserve the more positive part of what is happening I follow Buddhism, and there we have a very fantastic quote which says, winter will always turn into spring. So while I painted this whole picture to you, just imagine that a session which was said, make in India, 20 years ago we were beginning to put a question mark after that in a forum like this. We said, can you really make in India? Or are we just going to be, in the guise of making, we are going to be trading, labeling, or just putting together some SKD units? And that has changed. In the last 4-5 years, there is an extreme amount of positivity, fortunately again being driven by the government. The industry has always been very positive. Most of us in the industry is what I call survivors. They have gone through a very initial phase of some money that they made under the license or protectionist era. But after that, since 2005, we have been competing. Every capacitor my company makes competes with China on price, competes with Japan on quality, competes with Europe on design. So there is absolutely, thank you very much, there is absolutely no doubt that since then, every single company, and some of us are represented here today, has survived a global competitiveness in spite of the kind of cost factors that I just talked about. But that's not enough. If Sachin Tendulkar or Virat Kohli makes 100 on a pitch, doesn't mean the pitch is good. There will always be some Virat Kohlis. What we are now talking about is, can we make a pitch which is a little more predictable? Whether it's from a taxation perspective, it's from import duty perspective. This industry itself is not predictable. Which will be the next big phone in India is anybody's guess. 10 years ago, Sanjeev and I were working very closely with a company called Sony. Unfortunately, they are not one of the big boys today in the hardware business anymore. A little later, there was some other company. The Japanese then era went away, Koreans, the Americans. So we know this, and now a lot of Chinese names that you hear about. So it's by the nature of this industry, there's obsolescence, there's development, there's technology, and I haven't even spoken about design, which is a big part. I'm sure some of my friends here will speak about that. So in this very, very complex environment, especially for the students here, I would say, I feel sometimes envious of all the younger people in the room. And there is a reason for that. I really wish I were born 20 years later than I was born. Because I think this is a golden hour. The kind of opportunity that we are seeing together, the kind of ecosystem that is available today, and the kind of non-dependence we have on just going and getting a job. Because I think a lot of you are probably supported by somebody in your family. So you don't have to get that job on the day you pass out of your college. You have an opportunity to be a startup, you have an opportunity to stitch together a lot of things. And the challenges are out there. There is a problem on every street, and hence there could be a solution on every street. So while we are understanding, and you see a lot of the exhibition, what is our dream? And my personal dream is that what Mr. Prembell has put together for all of us, Convergence India, we have at least this large a hangar only with Indian-made products, not necessarily made by Indian companies. They can be made by companies who are owned by anywhere in the world, but which employs Indian people, which uses Indian skills, which is our contribution to the world, not just in economic terms, but in terms of the kind of design thinking we can do, the frugal innovations we can do, and so that we can prove to the world that we cannot only write codes for you, we cannot even only take your calls in a BPO, but we can also manufacture, design, and solve problems for you through the electronics manufacturing area. I'll stop there now and get on to the pleasant task of introducing my speakers and then hearing their viewpoints. And then when we have time, I'll ask them a couple of uncomfortable questions, and then it'll be your turn to do the same. So the first speaker we have today is Deepak Thakkar, who I've known for a few years now. I just learned that Deepak is, of course, he's the Vice President Business Development, Senior Vice President Business Development now of Flextronics, a company that I greatly admire. Can you imagine a company that just does things for other people and still makes $25 billion in revenue without a product of their own? Yeah. I think it's absolutely fantastic, and it explains the nature of this business itself. So obviously they're extremely competitive, their processes are, I work with them, I'm also a vendor, so I must put my disclaimer there. It's a delight to work with a company like that because it tells you how predictable such an unpredictable business can be, how competitive you can make it. And so it's not just one company, but I think it's an ecosystem of the suppliers that they put together along with their customers, which is really worth admiring. Deepak has had he lives of course in the Bay Area. He's not a graduate in electronics like I am not, and I will probably reserve that for the end, because we all come from diverse backgrounds and we all made it here. So all of you who are not from electronics and think it's not for you, the good news is that except for, I know Mr. Narayan is from IIT and he's from electronics, but Deepak is from the pharmacy. He's done his PhD in the pharmaceutical sciences, if I'm correct. And then I think we've got his brilliant experience and talent onto the electronics industry. Over to you, Deepak. Look forward to you.
Well, first, I thought that was fantastic. Well, thank you very much, not just for the introduction, but it's always fun to follow winter, right? Because I want to be spring. So thank you very much for that. That was fantastic. On a serious note, let me first start by thanking Mr. Bahl, Vinod, my friend, the Convergence team. I think this is an excellent, excellent forum, not just to have this discussion with the eminent speakers here on the table, excluding me, that is, but to address exactly all of the points that Vinod talked about. I see a bunch of very active and bright-eyed young generation at in some of the rows back there. This is a great opportunity for you to learn as to what this industry can potentially contribute, not just to the current situation, but as Vinod said, 20 years ago, Make in India would be a question mark. Today, Make in India is here to stay. I would say period, 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 and perhaps an exclamation even, because people are surprised about it. And I think by the time it's your turn, I fully expect Make in India will be irrelevant, because of course it'll be made in India. So that is where we need to make that transition to. That's what I hope will happen. So let me first start, for those of you who don't know me, let me just give you a brief introduction to who I am and the company I represent. So I'm Deepak Thakkar. I manage the India business for my company, Flextronics. We have a new name now. It's called Flex for the past couple of years. There's a little bit of story to that, but this may not be the right time for it. But we're the same company. We are a supply chain solutions company, an end-to-end, sketch-to-scale solutions company, and I'll talk about that in just a bit. So as I mentioned, I manage India business. While I live in California, I am here in India at least twice a month. And I know they're recording this, so I don't even know if I should say this, but I'm just going to anyway. Last week when I landed at Chennai airport, the immigration officer, I think it was like 3 a.m. in the morning, he was very jovial and nice, and he said, oh, based on our records, they do keep records, just for your information. He said, oh, you know what, just for our records, we see you come here super often. Like, wow, 20 days a month. I thought I was going to get in trouble, right? And I said, well, I'm just a business guy. This is what I do for a living, and I come back and forth. He says, oh, no, I didn't mean any harm. I'm just surprised that you are able to hold yourself together doing this for 20 days a month, going back and forth. And I said, well, no, it's a pleasure doing it, because I get to come to India, which of course is a home I grew up in. I haven't lived here for the past 30 years, but running business here in India is a thrilling opportunity, and so no harm done. The immigration guy was not holding me back. It's all good. If they're recording it, it's all good, and they'll let me come back next week when I'm planning on coming back again. So let me also tell, for at least the young audience who may not know a little bit about Flextronics or Flex now, let me tell you a little bit about that company, the company I work for. And I'll preface this by saying, that I'm not giving you these descriptors because I want you to know how big my company is or how wide it is or how brilliant it is. I'll tell you why I'm telling you all these in just a minute. So we have over 30 different countries where we conduct business, over 100 manufacturing sites. We have over 200,000 employees with about 20,000+ engineers within the company. As Vinod said, we have a turnover, or as we call revenue, of about $25 billion a year. And in a given year, across the Flex universe, we manufacture over $100 billion worth of products and solutions. Now, why do I tell you this? Not to brag. I'm not telling you this because I want you to know how big I am and, oh, wow, we really know what we're doing. Well, we do know what we're doing, but that's not the point of telling you this. The reason to tell you this is to give you a view into my vantage point. So when I give you my opinion on this, I just want you to know that I'm not looking at this one business in its microcosm. So I'm not just bright-eyed and excited about just this one business, but I'm looking at it from our entire portfolio perspective. And when I look at that, even then, from that viewpoint of a large company of $25+ billion in 30 different countries with 100+ manufacturing locations, there is no market in the world that is faster growing, that is more exciting, perhaps more challenging, but more relevant to Indian brands and global brands. So India as a market, for us, an electronics manufacturing company, a supply chain solutions company, a sketch-to-scale solutions company, no market is more important than India. Nothing grows faster in the world than India does. Now, electronics manufacturing in India, getting back to that very topical discussion, has seen an upswing in the last 3 to 4 years. That's about the time that I've been spending a lot of time here in India. There's been good policies put in place. Clearly, there's been a great deal of investment companies like ours and Sanjeev's and others have made in India so that we can service the needs of the local market. Right? What we have done from Flex's perspective is build a wide range of portfolio of solutions that we call sketch to scale. I'll tell you what that means. Essentially, it means that we can work with a company in India to help them design new products. We can help innovate new solutions for them. We can build a supply chain for them which has high velocity and is efficient. We can take their existing supply chain and tweak it. We can do new product introductions. We can do scale-up manufacturing. We can then provide logistics solutions. And of course, the objective of all of this is that we can manufacture, design, and distribute world-class products, world-class solutions with extreme innovation right here in India for the India market. That's our goal, and we're seeing that happen in India, right? Now, why is this market so important for me, for my company, for others? You'll hear this all the time. India is a very attractive market. Why is it? So by local standards, there are 400 million people within the country that can be classified as middle class. Now, there are some people who will argue, well, the definition of middle class here is different than in other regions. That doesn't matter. To me, that is irrelevant. What is relevant is that for this region, for this country, there's 400 million middle class people today. By 2027, the world's largest middle class population will be in India. By 2022, the largest population base will be in India. And over the past 20 years, now let's talk about income and spend and so forth. Over the past 20 years, the disposable income for an average household has increased 20-fold. This is right just from late 90s until today. What does all this mean? These are all macroeconomic indicators and some of them make a lot of sense, and then you say, okay, these are great. What does it mean in real terms? I'll tell you what it means in real terms for companies who are based here in India building products. It means that they can build more cell phones because there are more people who want to buy them. It means that there are more homes being built for which there are energy meters required. It means that there is a need for greener energy, therefore there is a demand for solar products. It means that as the population will age, there'll be more medical products required, there'll be more diagnostic products required. It means that as the population increases and becomes more affluent, companies want to monetize their spend habits and their information so that they can provide the best solutions for them. That means data centers will grow. That would mean that more computing power is going to be required. It will mean that there'll be better infrastructure required for delivering these solutions. It will mean that households will use more appliances. There'll be more coffee makers being used and more ovens and more washer dryers. So you can see the entire, it's not just about the population increasing and there's middle class increasing, but large companies that are based here in India will now have a local market which will perhaps be one of the largest middle class markets in the world. They don't want to make these products in different countries across the world, put it on a ship, spend 20 or 30 days bringing it here, carry the cost of capital of doing that, and of course, be subject to punitive taxation. They'd rather make it in India for India. The next point then comes is, can this be made in India? And so from my perspective, as a company that employs over 10,000 people here in India, which is slated to double just very shortly here for us, we manufacture solutions in all of these ranges. We help design products, we help introduce new solutions in the marketplace, we help scale them up, we provide logistics solutions, right from cell phones to appliances to solar products to servers to telco products, test and measurement equipment, mobile products, mobility products, etc. So is the will to do this manufacturing in India there? Yes, we have demonstrated that. Is the capability there? Yes, we're doing it today. If we can couple this with good policies, we now reach an inflection point in the economy where you've got amazing talent, you've got sketch to scale solutions being offered by a company like Flex and of course others. And we create a competitive marketplace that is coupled with policy that encourages local manufacturing versus trading or imports. And I think I'd love to talk about that during the next session. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Deepak. Yeah, okay. Yeah, fantastic. I think to lay for us what I'm sure Sanjeev in his mind is wondering what should be his path to becoming the next Flex. So thank you for sharing your insights, and what I found particularly remarkable is the reason why you think we are all in the right place at the right time. Yeah. And I think that's extremely important. I'd now invite Mr. Narayan to speak about his company and about his, just give me a couple of minutes. So I've known him now for several years. A fantastic engineer, an even better business person, a great human being, and a lovely friend. Yeah. And I mean every word of what I say because I've seen him operate in Indian circumstances, an electronic manufacturing services company that is unparalleled. And I say that for a couple of reasons. He has a design house in Germany. He has manufacturing outfits in the north of India and in the south of India, close to his customers. And he's done it in a very challenging environment, as we know in India. But most importantly, he also has 3 partners with him in the business. So he's a first generation entrepreneur. And what I really admire about him is the way that these 3 partners, under his leadership, have kept it so equitable, so fair. And I think that really requires a good human being to be able to do that, because very often we find in business, especially some of you are considering getting into business, that the business issues, the equity issues are as important as the rest of the whole business management is. So really hats off to you, Mr. Narayan. We look forward to hearing from you.
Good afternoon. After the introduction that Vinod has given about me and the introduction he has given about what's happening in the electronic industry, I'm going to take you on the journey beyond that. We talked about that there is a huge demand. There is also a strong need in India to protect as far as the imports is concerned, because electronics has become the largest or second largest import item as far as the country is concerned. The good news is that based on all these factors and the troubled times that we have seen in the previous 20 years, in the last 4 or 5 years, things have moved very positively. I think the country as a whole has decided that manufacturing per se is very important and needs to come back, because employment generation is where this is. So the lot of policies and discussions and interactions with the industry have taken place. If you look at electronics as products, so far we have been importing finished products. In the last 2 to 3 years, based on the policy environment, we have started assembling these products in India. And here I must say, I'll explain one more thing to you people, is that EMS. What is EMS? Electronic Manufacturing Service, where Deepak's company represents this sector on a global basis, and SGS as my company, we represent this in the smaller, tiny sector in India. But the role that an EMS company plays is very critical in this path to make in India. So we started with assembly of products, which took place in the last 2 to 3 years. And now, based on the movement in this sector, well, that's not me. We have now started moving into assembling of the components on the PCB, printed circuit boards. For some of the, especially with the students, they may not understand some of the words we are using. A printed circuit board is the board where we put the components to make a circuit. When you populate the boards, then you are really getting into the first step of manufacturing. In India today we have about 800 surface mount, what we call SMT lines, which are already operating. And we expect that in the next 2 to 3 years, there will be another 800 SMT lines which will be set up to take care of this need of generating populated boards in the country. And let me tell you, this populated board generation is not just from an employment generation viewpoint, but it is very important for taking the next step, which is developing the component ecosystem. Unless you have a healthy component ecosystem in the country, long term, we will not be able to survive. Also remember that components provides a lot of employment. Just to give you an example, if a finished product or assembly of products gives employment to 100 people, where we are populating boards, which is the SMT boards assembly, gives employment to 1,000 people. And when we get into component manufacturing, it multiplies by another factor and it becomes 10,000 people. So long term, when we are looking at employment and value addition, it can be created only if we have a healthy component ecosystem. I believe that this is the focus area for our policymakers now, to see how they can make this viable. There is a big viability gap in component manufacturing, and a lot of it is hopefully being addressed in the new electronic policy, which is in a far advanced stage of discussion, and we are all keeping our fingers crossed that it will be announced in the next 2 to 3 months. Once that happens and you have a component ecosystem in place, I think we have a good position as far as the manufacturing is concerned. The next level of value add and competitiveness is going to come with design. We have to focus on design products in India where we own the IP in this country. So we have to have products which we design in India for India and the world. And I believe the engineering talent that we have in this country, this is very much possible. In fact, a lot of the global companies are using this talent and designing products in India using these skills that we have. But unfortunately, the IP does not rest in India. And if we want to take real long-term benefit as a country and become competitive globally in the export market, we have to parallelly make policies which is going to encourage design. If we do that, then I think we have a great future in the electronic manufacturing. And I can only tell you, this is an excellent area to be in. It has positions for tiny, micro, tiny, small, medium, and large companies to coexist in this. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Narayan. Your optimism is indeed infectious. So somebody who's been in the business for that long, seen the ups and downs of electronics manufacturing industry. And I know as a person that he's now planning another innings of growth for his own company and his partners, which is absolutely fantastic. How many of you have read this book called White Tiger? Arvind Adiga, has anybody? Yeah, you have. So to give you a brief, I think it's a fascinating book. Doesn't show India in great light, but puts it on a factual thing, if I may say so. So the protagonist in that book starts off by, I'll be very brief about the story. So this guy is basically running a taxi service for some large BPOs in Bangalore. And every night after he's done a hard day's work, he comes home, and that's the time he gets to read the newspaper of the day because he's had no time since morning. He starts running to make money, and then he reads in the papers that Hu Jintao, the then premier of China, is coming to India. And when Hu Jintao is interviewed in China before this visit by his press, saying, "What are you going to India for?" So he said, "Look, India is a land of entrepreneurs, and I want to understand in India, how does entrepreneurship happen? How can we promote entrepreneurship in China, etc., etc." So this gentleman starts writing a letter to Hu Jintao, and he says, "Look, you don't have to come to India for that. You just need to talk to somebody like me." Yeah, so this typical Indian confidence. And he starts writing a letter to Hu Jintao, which is what this book is about. And he says, "I can't do it in a day because I also have to sleep and I have to catch up with my work. So I will get 10 days to write this letter. So I'll write 10 chapters, give you the whole story of Indian entrepreneurship." And the book is about how a person from the villages with almost no formal training, who's cleaning tables in a small dhaba, a restaurant or whatever, becomes the owner of a transport company. And what keeps him going, and what is that basic entrepreneurship drive that gets him there. It's a fascinating story, and like I said, doesn't show India in great light, but India is a diverse country. I think we can handle a lot of criticism, rightly and wrongly. So I would recommend that book. But why I brought up White Tiger right now is that our next speaker, Mr. Ravi Shankar Rai, reminds me of that gentleman. So Mr. Rai, he started his, while you walk there, let me just tell you that he started his enterprise or his first professional things in '94. In '99, he decided he had had enough. In 5 years, he met a lot of employers who didn't tell him how to do things right. So in '99, he decided to do it himself. And the success story is that in the last 17 years, he has now a company that employs 1,600 people. So Mr. Rai, over to you, and we love to listen to your story.
Thanks, Vinod. You reminded my old days, and I always feel very happy, energetic when I remember my old days. Thank you, Deepak. Flextronics is a very reputed and father in manufacturing of electronics assembly and electronics manufacturing. Deepak has said India is going to become largest middle class population in next couple of years. So Middle class will definitely use more electronics. So electronics future is bright in India. Prem has given a very good data about GDP in manufacturing sector in 1934 is 37%, was 37%, which I got immediately alert. India GDP was 37% in 1934. Means we are capable to manufacture. We were hopeless in last 20 years that India cannot manufacture, cannot grow in manufacturing, and we were moving toward services sector, IT and services sectors. But yeah, we have potential, although GDP has gone down from 37 to 14%. Yeah, he said MSME is in stress. Yeah, very true. MSME is always in stress in India. 60% employment is given by manufacturing sector, which is very like, it is one of the most motivating factor to be in manufacturing. They manufacturing represent, like he said, manufacturing invest 4 to 5% revenue also. Vinod said very correctly, cost of finance. So this is one thing where Indian manufacturers are lacking. Indian manufacturers not being given access to finance sectors in large scale. Finance sector is not willing to invest into manufacturing, maybe region, maybe anything. Sanjeev, I am very like, you said assembly to SMT to component. Component is the biggest factor to create employment. Assembly is less, then SMT is a bigger one, component is biggest one. And without having component knowledge and component production, India cannot stand, we cannot stand on our own leg. So it's a good to hear all the manufacturing ecosystem, and I would like to listen more. See, in last 3-4 years, we have seen some vision. Vision is given by our government. Our Honorable Prime Minister has given a vision of Make in India, Digital India, Smart City, many things. I met to more than 300 people in last, 300 foreigner in last 6 months. More than 1,000 people in last 1 year. Everyone is very curious to know about what is Smart City, what is Digital India, what is Make in India. So there are many things is happening, and this all credit goes to our current government and visionary Prime Minister, who has given a vision to Make in India, Smart Digital India, and many more. Now I'll come on, but this vision has to be carried by every Indian, because only government cannot do anything. We missed the train way back in 90, and China took the advantage of that train, and history always say that we missed the train, and China become industrial power of the world. So I have seen exhibition where we are having we are participating this event since 2001, and every year the Chinese presence is growing. Their presence is growing every year. There are many stalls, 60% our stall are made in China. So Indian industry has to focus. Make in India is possible only if Indian manufacturers are motivated. We should not do Make in India manufactured by China or manufactured by Taiwan. It can be made in India because we need technology. We need to understand technology. So we should always welcome a company like Flextronics, European company who are willing to invest, who are willing to give made in India. Now I'll come on market size, current domestic production, government initiative. Market size, India is one of the largest in world in terms of consumption, and predicted to be $400 billion by 2020. Of course, mobile phone is contributing 39%, TV 8%, notebook 6%, and 4% laptop desktop. There are market opportunity aerospace and defense also, which is growing and predicted to be around $70 billion in next couple of years. Now current domestic production. Total electronic hardware production was around 33 billion in 2014-15, which is approximately only 1.5% of world electronics. Now there are many schemes coming which has given a boost to manufacturing, electronic manufacturing, like demonetization. This has given a, like, it might be there might be many who can not who may be against demonetization, but it has given a very good boost to electronic industry, POS, and there are many electronics items like mobile phone, POS. They started growing immediately. Everybody started using mobile phone just because of demonetization. They want to use Paytm, they want to use many things. Entire industry is going. So, and if we see investment in manufacturing sector has grown from 11,000 crore in 2014 to 1,28,000 crore till 2016-17. So there are good countries growing in electronics. Government initiative, Thakkar, I already discussed, like demonetization, smart city, many Make in India, PMA. There like the main challenges are this, like we, as I started, like every Indian has to support Make in India, because if you will not buy Make in India will not grow. Like if you go in any country, if you go in Japan, if you go in China, they always prefer to buy made in their own country, make in their own country, not just because that is quality product, because they want to support their industry. So if I remember 20 years back during our college time, school time, when we were buying any radio, TV, radio, small radio or small battery, and it goes faulty within 3 days. So we said it must be Chinese. Okay. But now China has grown like anything. The quality is at par with any other country. So it's because people have purchased Chinese product in their own country and in other part of world also. So for any manufacturer, it is any manufacturer cannot produce quality in one day. Quality will be after 5 years, 10 years of regular continuous R&D and production. So first production has to be sold out economic, because if my first production, or if any manufacturer first production is not sold, then within 1 or 2 years he has to close down. And of course, the initial production will be cost wise very high. So like I have seen I have seen the some lava cylinder was supposed to be in Panelists. He has not joined, I don't know why. But I have seen many mobile manufacturers are into stress, Indian mobile manufacturers, because it's not because they are getting competition. It's because we are not buying Indian, Make in India. So it will be possible only if we buy, if we support Make in India. It is not government or any industry initiative. It is joint initiative of every Indian. If Indian will buy, it will grow. Secondly, finance sector is always challenges. Finance sector is if any manufacturer, small manufacturer goes to banker. Bank is not willing to finance, and right now it is a very challenging because of many bank are stressed due to NPA and other things. I personally never support this banking system. If NPA is NPA, they have to be, because I was going through WhatsApp few days back that there are some industries who has done NPA, and they are like they are not able to access metro train, they are not able to access transport, they are not able to access. So there should be very strict law against NPA. It is not, bank money is public money. It is not just for making some kind of experience by entering into business. Bank money, anybody who is becoming NPA, because of NPA only bank is not willing to finance to other people. So if someone is being NPA, he has to be very strictly penalized, and he has to be entire, like money must be recovered. So bank will get confidence, and bank will boost money to other peoples. So thank you very much, Vinod, Deepak, Sanjeev. Thank you very much, Prem, for regular organizing conventions in India regularly, Make in India event. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ravi. First of all, for partly taking over my role and giving your comments on what we said. But I hope the people in the audience notice that a hard-nosed businessman like Ravi is also able to see an opportunity in demonetization, right? And of course, he had, towards the end, he spoke at length about not just make in India, but buy in India or buy Indian. And I will reserve my comments on that. But it gives me the cue for my first question that I'd like to ask my panelists. So this whole nationalism in manufacturing, how well placed is it? Number one, and we've got Sanjeev, who's got a homegrown company, we've got Ravi in the entire gamut of things, and Deepak, who has a more global international exposure. That's question number one, part A of that. Part B is, within that I would like to put in is, while that is true that a lot of Japanese, German, later Korean companies had this, because they were a small market and they had this loyalty for made in their own countries, China actually completely changed that. And China began by first looking at exports, looking at global marketplace, and then only lately now they are focusing on their own Indian markets. So what do we have to learn from them? I'm not saying we can emulate China, things are very different between these two countries, but I'm sure from a make in India perspective for electronics per se, I would love to hear your remarks. So do you want to go first, Deepak? Yeah.
Okay, all right. I thought you were just going to give me the winter and the spring follows winter, but I guess that's drastically changed. All right. Okay, so you asked two questions. One is on nationalism, and the other one is around, the Chinese model, and what can India learn from it? That's what I took from that. Right? Let me, if I could, I'll address the second one first. So yes, true that the Chinese market or the Chinese industry grew more on the backs of exports, right? The Chinese manufacturing became the manufacturing ground for the world, and on the basis of that, their middle class grew, and as their middle class grew, the local market also became an important market. Fair enough. That was that model. During that period of time, as China was growing up, the global playground or playground for global manufacturing, India invested more in high value-add services. It matched with the Indian skill set of excellent engineering talent, led by, of course, the IITs of the world, and then beyond that, right? And so the services sector grew. So it wasn't as if, I mean, I know that there was this discussion on missing the bus. I think the economy just took a different bus, right? So it wasn't so much missing that bus. It was perhaps even a conscious decision to take a different bus, and that's okay, right? So you got a different bus, that bus is going in a certain direction. There's somebody else who takes a different bus and they're going in a different direction. Fair enough. You know, we're all reaching a destination. Now comes then a time when, can you take another bus in addition to the one that you've taken? And I think that's what the discussion is about, right? So while the Chinese model was look outward first, build the middle class, and now look inward, I think during the time when India has grown the services sector, the middle class has grown. So that hard work of building the middle class on the backs of becoming a global playground for manufacturing, that work has already been now done in India, right? We've got one of the largest middle class populations in the world. So I would challenge us to think about that and say, okay, great. We, or India decided to take a different path, but the outcome was about almost the same. Because you've got the middle class and you've got the market now, and you can have the local manufacturing for India. Or do you have to go back in and subscribe to the same model as China did, which is again build global manufacturing and maybe 20 years later then come back locally? That won't work because the genie's out of the bottle, right? The market has grown. Nobody's going to wait for a cell phone that's made in India in 20 years' time. They want it today. So we got to make it today, right here in India, right? So that's my answer to the second part. The first part, nationalism. I don't speak on this behalf for you know, in flippance. I'm pretty serious about this. I look at the world as a global market, not a single market, but it is a global playing ground. You know, things were different 20 years ago or 25 years ago. Or of course earlier than that for Japan after the war, or even in Korea, where there was a great drive towards nationalism that encouraged people to buy local products and all the rest of it. Those were more closed economies. Those were different times. World wasn't so much connected as it is today. So from my vantage point, unfortunately that doesn't work, because I think what works, let's not focus on what doesn't work. What I'd like to focus on is what works. What works is a quality product which is made in India. Let's say it's made anywhere, right? It could be designed anywhere, it could be made anywhere, but if it is a competitive product that has challenging and compelling features for the end user at a price point that they'll be willing to buy, that's going to sell. I don't know the last time I bought a product and I flipped it up and said, where is it made? That wasn't my decision-making criteria. The decision-making criteria is this of a quality that I want? Is this at a price point I want? Does it have the features I want? Does it have the availability that I want? I don't want to wait for 6 months for it. I want it today. Today, you can do all of that with a lot of Make in India products. So you don't have to make that conscious decision of going in and saying that I'm buy Indian, be Indian. You don't have to be that. You can be Indian and buy global. You can be Indian and buy an Indian product. In fact, what I would challenge us to think is that let's not buy Indian because we think that a quality spec from a place other than India is better. That is wrong, because the products that we manufacture in India for our customers globally and for those who are selling in India are at par and exceed quality specs and innovation specs with the best solutions in the world. So there's no reason for us to think that a product that is made here is not capable or is not competitive or any of that, because it is. So let's look at it from that perspective, and that will actually make this whole process far easier.
Thank you. Yeah, very clear, very good. Yeah. Would you like to add?
Yeah. I'll take the issue on nationalism, and I would say that, if you look at what our Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, has done for our country and our people is phenomenal. In the last 3 years today, he's visited countries all over the world and changed the perception and the kind of respect and regard that is there for India and Indians has changed dramatically. Nationalism is something, that we have to start believing in ourselves. Because he believes in himself and he believes in his people, he's been trying to convey that message. the kind of people who have been coming to India and are looking for opportunities. I mean, a situation today where India is the fastest growing economy, I think it's a unbelievable position to be in. No company can afford not to be present in India or looking at India as a market. What is important is, that since there has been a gap as far as our domestic production is concerned, manufacturing somehow is not only in electronics but a lot of the other sectors also lost focus, and that's why we've come down to 14 or 15%. We need some breathing time, and that is where we as Indians have to understand that a short-term pain for long-term gain. If each one of us can carry this message forward, I think we will go a long way. And to me, whether a company is an Indian company or it's a Chinese company, as long as it is based in India and using the Indian labor, to me is made in India. And we should not be differentiating with this. The other big concept that we always have is that Indian quality is not good. I have a very strong reaction to that, because I think Indians, whether it is the automotive sector, today the Indian components are competing all over the world and they are considered to be the best. In my own company, our biggest exports, we export almost 40% of our production, and our export market is Germany and Italy. The products we are making here are better than what they are producing in their own country, and that is why 80% of their business comes to us and 20% goes to the EMS companies which are located 20 kilometers from where the OEM is located. Now, so, and we have done this over the last 20 years. So there's no reason why we should be afraid of competing globally or not being able to produce quality. To me, that's nationalism. So let's take pride in what we are doing, and I'm sure we can change the whole perception, especially as long as we have a person like Mr. Modi marketing us and changing the perception globally. Second point that you talked about China and India. I think India has got its own unique set of problems, has got its own unique situation, and we have to find our own path. We cannot say one is better or the other is better, but we are a democracy. China is a dictatorship. They could make changes or laws overnight. We can't do that. We have to carry our 1.2 billion people with us. So I think the way we are moving forward is looks fine. It has to be speeded up. It has to be speeded up, and I think the government is making sincere effort to try and do this process. Unfortunately, we in industry feel it's still too slow. We hope that things will catch up, but we have to give ourselves a little time, and that is why the government is imposing import duties on some of the products. There are other products which are ITA 1 products where they can't do that. So this will give us a breathing time of 4 to 5 years, and I'm sure we'll come out very strong.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Extremely balanced, and you know why I said that he's such an experienced hand. It was obvious in his answers. Ravi, do you want to add something to this?
So, I'm not against China. I think my language is like, I'm not good in English. So, I'm from Eastern India. So, might be it was your language. China has done superb in last 20 years. What I feel, I'm working with world #1 company. I don't work with #2. I'm working with many companies like Microsemi, Viavi, JDSU, Spirent, and they are into niche technology. They are leader into technology. We are into technology solutions. So we never work with any #2. We work with #1 only, and #1 means market share are more than 60% worldwide. So what I tried to say, quality means not a very poor quality. If a Indian SME sector produce one product, let's say that I produce 100 mobile. If mobile is not sold, from where, who will buy mobile, and from where I'll get my revenue back, and how will I pay to interest to bank? So, Sanjeev said breathing time is required. I purely respect China very much. They are a good friend of ours, and they have grown like anything. And again, I'll say, I am agree with Sanjeev that and Deepak, until Indian labor is being used, it's a made in India. But what I said, make in India or made in India should not be manufactured in China. So that is, we are talking about make in India. So so my point is same, and I'm nowhere against any country manufacturing sector or any country, because they have grown well. They have gone to a different level. It will be tough for India to reach up to that level. We'll always far behind, because we are 20-year deal.
Sure. I'm glad we are on the same page, and that we have a lot to learn from China. True. Good. I have a couple of questions, but I will save them. First, get in. Someone in the audience, do you have some questions? Yes, this comment. And the students, you don't want to know anything about this industry? It's very rare that you will get this bunch of speakers. Yes, sir.
My question is, I think, to become a competitive product and the quality product is one thing, but there's a certain bottlenecks as far the infrastructure is concerned, which impact the logistic cost. I understand that the worldwide where the logistic cost is around 6 to 7%. In India, we are still at 12%. Earlier, the taxation was an issue. Now, GST is enforced. Do you see this really going to get a good impetus as far that, the planning supply chain is concerned? Second is, but we have a constraint. I mean, it's a port infrastructure or the road infrastructure, even the train. And it's 70% transport in India happens by the road, while the rest of the world is a train or water or, So how is, I mean, these factors also have to be looked into it.
Somebody want to answer this?
Well, let me talk about the logistics thing, Sanjeev, and I'll definitely pass it on to you right away. Infrastructure is a issue which is, it's not a nut that you can crack overnight, right? I'm not in that business, I don't know, but I'm assuming that you can't build bridges and roads and ports and airports overnight. I live in the United States, and we actually have, at forums, we have very similar discussions. So again, I think infrastructure is also relative, right? You might think that, well, the United States infrastructure is fantastic. Well, we talk about the fact that our bridges need repair and airports need to be upgraded and we need to have better roads. And yet you might think, well, that is so utopian. That's such a first world problem. So again, I think it's a relative term. The other thing I feel is that you also have to be pragmatic to know what you can impact and what you can affect in your business today. Are the roads going to get overnight as good as you would want them to be? No, they're not. Are you going to have world-class ports overnight? No. But are there amazing ports in India? Yes, there are. We run a significant portion of our business here in India. And I think Vinod asked me this question earlier, and this is a good segue that I can actually give you a vantage point view into this. About 3 years ago, India was a marginal export market. About 3 to 5 years ago, a marginal export market for flex. Today, India is a significant local market for flex. Now, what do these terms mean for a company my size? For something to be significant, you can imagine for a $25 billion company, for a market to be significant and relevant, it has to be a pretty generous contributor of revenue, right? If it's just a very, very small percentage, it's not relevant. It's not meaningful. It's not significant. But India is significant. The infrastructure has not changed all that much over the last few years, right? We still operate out of most of our shipments whatever electronic shipments that we need to bring in, whether it is for domestic consumption or whether it's for exports, come into Chennai port. Have the transit times gotten better? Yeah, they have. So, let's talk about things that are actually good. There are things that have gotten tremendously better in the country. You now have options of going to Mundra port up in the north, or you can go into Mumbai port. You can go into other secondary ports as well, depending on where you want to do your manufacturing. Is it as good as one would want it to be? I don't think it'll ever get there. And that is the reason I bring up the discussion we have in the United States, where we are still having this discussion about better infrastructure. So I say, let's definitely keep the pressure on that discussion, but let's not wait for that to happen, because even with what exists in India today, our sketch-to-scale solutions are competitive. We can design competitive products here, we can build competitive supply chains, we can bring global supply chains into India through the infrastructure that exists, we can build world-class products with Indian engineers, with global engineers, create jobs here, and service the local market and export market. It is happening. So let's not wait for the ideal world, because the existing one is not so bad.
Can I just add to what Deepak said? I agree with him. There's no point in waiting for the ideal world. You know, what I feel is that, you know, they can never be in business, as we see, that everything is going your way. It doesn't happen. We understand that there are limitations as far as logistics is concerned. It's absolutely right. So we have to find ways around it. And one of the things is that, you know, we've got such excellent design capabilities within that. And we have to quickly start working towards leveraging that. I mean, we are making embedded software for products all over the world. I mean, why the hell can't we do this for ourselves and come up with products? Because once you have the IP with you, the value add that you'll be holding, then you'll not be worried about the 3% or 4% logistic cost or the finance cost, which has been additional. So we have to work within what is best for us and try and leverage our strengths to make India and our products more competitive. In the long run, only competitive products will survive.
Sure.
I think you said it absolutely right, Sanjeev, and I feel so compelled to add to that, because I 100% agree with everything you said, right? And if I could also give you one more viewpoint that Ravi mentioned earlier. We talk about GST as a government policy. You know, in a strange way, and I do. I'm on the plane a lot, so I do a lot of thinking on the plane. I guess that's about the only time I get my free time. So one of the things I was thinking about just the other day was, I find GST to be a grand equalizer in infrastructure as well. You know why? Because used to be a time where there were tax benefits of doing business in certain parts of the country, and your customer base was in different parts of the country. Infrastructure was not good. There was no reason to upgrade it, because you know what? You were getting certain tax benefits. GST is that grand equalizer. You're not going to go manufacture in a place if a port is not good close by. You are not going to conduct business in a region which is not going to be close to your customers, or your roads are not good. So guess what? As you start moving out from regions where the infrastructure is poor to regions where infrastructure is good, the ones who want to win your business, those state governments will make those investments. We see that happening in Andhra Pradesh, in Telangana, in Tamil Nadu, in Maharashtra, in Gujarat, in Himachal. You see that happening. And I think that with GST, this equalization process will continue further. It won't be some grand initiative coming from some central office here in Delhi, but it'll be a local office who wants to win that business, who will say, you know what, come to my state, I'll help you with the infrastructure. We are building a new port. And it's because of GST that you will go there and do that. So that's what I think would probably be a driver too.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
Excellent, excellent.
But yeah, this whole federal competitiveness that's been kicked in along with cooperation is really working. Your question about logistics, I may add, is also true, and the responses are also true for the other factors of manufacturing. On logistics alone, after the GST has come in, we have seen that the trucks are taking 2 days lesser to come into Delhi. You're right, is it the cheapest? No, I gave you the example of how much we are off by. Sanjeev ji very rightly mentioned, you need to compensate that by some other value factors that you bring in because of your manufacturing or design. It's also true that electricity costs have come down, effective energy costs. So while really in terms of per unit cost, it has not dropped, but the amount we use our DG set, at least in UP, in Noida, I've seen has come down, and we have promises that this is going to get better. Finance, I thought, was getting better, but for the recent NPA discussions that we are having. But I'm again sure that over a period of time, the direction, as I think Mr. Narayan very rightly mentioned, the direction is very positive. Everything is improving. In business, we strongly feel it needs to improve much faster. Yeah, but fortunately, we are done with the days where things are getting bad. That's probably not happening in most areas. Sorry, you wanted to add something?
Yeah.
And then we close.
Actually, logistics is one of the most profitable industry in India. And as I said, telecom is the most negative industry in India. So if logistics has to be most profitable, then they have. So your concern is very, very genuine. So I think there's something should be done like telecom in logistic industry also, and it will happen in few coming year. Some like now telecom was very now it has come from 500 rupees to 100 rupees, and you can get 100 GB data in a month. So I think logistic is competition free now. So that's competition has to be there. Secondly, I wanted to listen understand what is the role of SME sector, a small sector in electronic manufacturing. How they can play a role, because see, large corporate, a big corporate, they can do a research for 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, and they can do experiment. But SME is not able to do any experiment. They having a limited fund and they want immediate return. So how SME sector can contribute in making India electronics manufacturing?
Okay, the task of a moderator has several tasks, and one of the ones that I'm sure the organizers will appraise me by is whether I finished on time or not. So really now is the time that I should finish if I want full marks for timing. But however, you've asked a very, very pertinent question, which is why I won't deflect it to the other speakers. I'll try and answer it myself in a very brief way. Amongst others, we are also an SME company, especially by the new definition now. And Tom Peters, the famous consultant guru, the American guru, he has said it very nicely in one of his books. So many years ago, he was commissioned by a very large corporation to find out that the corporation said, look, we are in many businesses. And in every single business, we find that there is always a smaller player who is more profitable than we are and who is a pain in the ass, pain in the neck, whatever it is, right? So can you find out for us, why is it that these SMEs are able to do better than us? And what is at the core of this whole thing? So Tom Peters being Tom Peters, he wrote out a big questionnaire with his research team, sent out his research team into the field, interviewed that many SMEs, that many large companies, and he had put out about 3 months for the study. On the second day, a young student, like the people sitting here, a bright young girl, faxed in those days to Tom, and she said, Tom, I found the answer. SMEs survive because they have to, right? So that is the answer. Why will SMEs, why does somebody with me, a company like ours or Mr. Narayan, something, still manage to compete with the giants of the world? Is because we are extremely focused. An entrepreneur spends all his energy, his life, like you have done, from being an employee to becoming an employer, and you will always find the answers. You're right, we may not have the budgets for R&D, but I can tell you, even from a small company like ours, the number of new capacitors that we brought to the market in the last 20 years is much more than many of my very senior and big colleagues. And that's not because I'm smarter, it's just because I just don't have the luxury of relaxing. So I have to do it better, and I hope that's a positive note to end this on. I hope you've enjoyed. Yeah, you have a question? Okay, it better be a good one, because the last one. There's another one, yeah.
Good noon, sir.
Yeah.
Well, I have two questions.
Okay.
First one is, which is the most difficult part? I mean, where we are lacking? Is it the R&D department or the business department or something? I mean, other department. And the second question is, like I'm an electronics student. Okay. I want some tips to grow in this electronics manufacturing field. So.
Who wants to take that?
Look, I don't think we're lacking in anything. So there's no lack of anything. The quality is there, the R&D is there, there's ability to manufacture. There is nothing for electronics manufacturing in India that is lacking from a skill perspective. I was asked this question in a different format at a different event. Vinod was with me, and they asked me, what are the 3 things you would want to change, to increase, or what would you recommend to enhance electronic manufacturing in India? And I said, I have, and so my reply to that was, the top 3 things are policy, policy, and policy. If there are supportive policies, then this industry is set for a exponential growth with a significant increase in not just the capabilities in-house, but also in employment. So none of you sitting here should feel that there is a lack of capability. It's the capability of all of you that drives the design and engineering and the manufacturing skills for hundreds and trillions of dollars worth of products globally. So there is no lack of capability at all.
Can I just add to when he said policy, policy, and policy? I would only say policy which is stable and has visibility. Because electronics manufacturing, you need investment, especially when you're talking about developing the component ecosystem. And their investments are not going to come in unless people have a clear roadmap as to where they are going to go. Otherwise, no one would put those investments.
Your second question was a little to do with your own career counseling, if I may say so. How do you get into this business? Which is a very, very important question. A very short answer to that. So I wrote a paper a couple of years ago, more for my own kids, because they had a similar question. And it was called the YOLO plan. So give me your email ID and I will send it to you. YOLO, because every time I gave them a serious discussion, they said, YOLO, chill dad, or whatever it meant. And I learned that it meant you only live once, dad, so please chill. Yeah. So I told them, kids, you're telling me you only live once, and I agree with you for once. But because you live only once, or so you believe, you must have a very solid plan for what you want to do with that life. And it's not for me to make that plan. So it's a long discussion, I won't get into that. But what the paper said was simple. Where do you want to be 10 years, 15 years from now? Where do you see yourself? And now that's a difficult question, but there are some parts of that which are very clear to every person. Do you want to work for somebody else, or do you want to be on your own? It's a very clear answer you will have. Or do you want to be a very rich man, or it doesn't really bother you so much as long as you make a decent living? So these important crossroads are something that you have to be comfortable with. And once you put these little crossroads in your mind very clearly, where is it that you want to go? So some of them you won't get a very clear picture. So once you know where you want to be, or you have a fuzzy idea of where you want to be, there are a few roads that can lead you there. And that is where strategic choice comes in. So those few roads may be, you want to pursue a master's degree and then go to the US, or you want to already set up a small entrepreneurship thing here, or you want to work with somebody and want to learn the ropes. So there are 3 clear roads. See which one of them gives you a better chance of getting there. Yeah, so it's a matter of choices, but at least now you're making a slightly more thought through choice. And a very quick third step would be that once you make the choice, challenge yourself. Do I really want to get there? I'm sorry, I'm going to take a couple of minutes more because I think it's very important. I hope it helps you. So while I'm having this discussion, my son says, look, all that is great. We have a reasonable business. He can join us. But he says, no, I want to be a sports person. Yeah, and this is a discussion we've had when he was very young. And the sports he chooses is horseback polo, which is not a very common sport. And we have some horses in the family, so he's got this thing. He's a good rider. He's been riding since he's 5. And so I have this discussion with this young man when he's only 13. And he says, I'm very clear in my head that I want to be there. So you can imagine this is not an easy discussion for an Indian family. from a middle class to be having, because it will mean a lot of money, it will mean a lot of, and there is always a risk as a sportsman, you make it there or you don't make it there. So what I make him do is something of a YOLO plan. I had not invented the word then. And what he does is, okay, so if you want to be in polo, you want to be serious about this, where do you get which will make you happy in so many years? And we had this conversation when he was 16, he wrote this paper saying 5 goals in 5 years. So polo like golf has a handicap. A 5 goal is a very, very good handicap to have. The highest handicap player in India today is 6. So he writes a paper not playing polo at all, saying he wants to be at 5 goals in 5 years. Now that's a clear target. And why I'm saying is it's so important to have that target. Once he had that target, we knew what roadmaps he has to go through. And as a non-player, nobody recognizes you in the world. When you have this kind of a goal, you need to put him through a very tough test. And that tough test was that he had to live in 6 months in a tent in Jaipur in the summer of Delhi, be completely on his own at 16 years of age, and prove to us and prove to himself that he had the mettle to take on a task like this. So either in 6 weeks we will have this discussion again, or we will never discuss polo again as a career. That was the deal we made. So you have to put yourself through that challenge. He took that on, and I'm happy. God has been kind. He played for India last year. He is today at 4 goals this year, and he's making a career for himself in polo. So that's what you can do, provided you have a very, very clear aspiration, a very clear objective, and the roadmaps will start following. It's never going to be easy. Understand that none of us has had an easy life. But while going through that tough life, it will be great if you are chasing something that you so much feel about. Imagine going through a tough life and doing something that you don't believe in. Then it won't be worth it. I hope the session has been helpful to all of you. Thank you very much. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you, speakers, for your time and valuable remarks. May I request our chair to kindly hand over a token of appreciation to all the speakers? Mr. Deepak Thakkar. Mr. Ravi Shankar. Mr. Sanjeev Narayan. May I request Mr. Sandeep Chandelier to kindly hand over a token of appreciation to our chair, Mr. Vinod Sharma.